As I mentioned earlier, two tables appear in an appellate brief: the table of contents and the table of authorities. The table of authorities is something you can't set up until after the brief is written and close to final. So we're going to start by setting up our table of contents, which you can do much earlier in the process, and also the table of contents is the first table to appear in your brief. Now, if you've already written a detailed outline of your brief and you've figured out your point headings, this is something you could in theory set up in its entirety at the beginning, but you can also wait and do both tables at the end. I'm going to start by suggesting a way to set up your document at the outset that gives you the basic framework for the table of contents. As I mentioned before, the exemplar we're working from is an actual brief filed in the Wisconsin Court of Appeals. The case is Morgan v. Circuit Court for Dane County. What you see now are the first 2 pages of the brief. There's the cover, which lists the caption and the attorneys, and the page right after that is the table of contents. I want to point out a few things about the table of contents. The headings that are highlighted in yellow, I'm going to refer to these as section headings. These are the different sections of the brief. And when you're formatting your headings, these will all be marked as heading 1. They're the first level of heading, and I'll explain more on that in a bit. The headings within the arguments section, these are point headings. And it's possible to have a brief with point headings in other sections. For example, the statement of facts might have point headings, but this brief only has point headings in the arguments section. You'll mark the main point headings, the ones that are listed here in dark blue, as heading 2, and then the subheadings, those in light blue, will be heading 3. Again, this is going to make a lot more sense once I talk about marking headings, which requires you to use the style feature in Word. So just hold off on that for a second. I just wanted you to know that at the moment as background. The other thing I wanted to point out is the page numbering. The caption page, the cover, that doesn't have a page number. The table of contents does have a page number, a lowercase Roman numeral 1. And you can see this lowercase Roman numeral numbering continues with the table of authorities. Then once we get into the substance of the brief, the statement of issues for review, the numbering shifts to traditional Arabic numerals. Now we can see this difference in the numbering when we look at the table of contents, and we can also observe this if we flip through the first few pages of the brief. You can see it's Roman numerals for the tables, and then once we move on to the substance of the brief, now we have Arabic numerals. You'll likely want to do something similar for your brief, which is really just a matter of inserting section breaks in the appropriate places. You should think of your brief as consisting of 3 parts. There's the caption or cover, which doesn't have a page number, as I mentioned. There are the tables and any other preliminary material, and that relies on the lowercase Roman numerals traditionally. And then the brief itself has Arabic numerals. To differentiate these parts in your document, you're going to want to insert a section break, next page, between each of those parts. And that means you only need to do this in 2 places, actually. The first place you would do this is after the cover page. And then the second place you would do it is after the table of authorities, because that will differentiate those 3 sections of the brief. Now, within each of these parts, when you move from one section to another, you'll insert a page break rather than a section break. So, for example, the table of contents and the table of authorities are within the same part of the brief, and they both have the Roman numerals for the page numbers, but you'll want the table of authorities to start on a new page, so you'll still insert a break, but that'll just be a page break rather than a section break. Likewise, once we move on to the substance of the brief, we would have a page break after the statement of issues for review, and another page break after the statement on oral argument and publication. Once we get to the statement of facts, at the end of the statement of facts, we would have a page break. But here we're not inserting a page break because this is actually a multi-page statement of facts, and there are just going to be natural page breaks that don't require us to insert something. Now, with that preface, let's go ahead and set up our document. Everyone should have a sample document to work with, your own copy of this brief that I'm working on here, but don't start playing with that just yet. That document has the entire brief in it. But right now I'm going to talk to you about setting up a blank document. If you'd like, you can open up an empty document in Word and work alongside me if you want to parrot what I'm doing. Now, in the document that I have now, the only thing that already appears there is the caption, the cover page. Formatting that is a pain, and I'm sure I'm not doing it correctly, so I'm not including how to do that in this demonstration. I'm just going to show you how to set up the headings so that you can create the table of contents. The first thing I'm going to do right now, though, I'm going to hit this paragraph symbol, which you can see underneath the Home tab. And that will show us all of the hidden coding. So you can see all of the paragraph symbols, which reflects anytime you've hit enter. And so right now, I've put my cursor at the end of the cover page, and this is where I want to insert my first page break, or rather, sorry, my first section break, new page. To do that, I'm going to go up here, click Layout, go to Breaks, and I'm going to skip over page breaks. I'm going to Section Breaks, Next Page. I'm going to click that, and you can see a section break showed up here, and I'm just going to hit Enter so you can see it more prominently. There's a section break there, and now we move on here to the top of the next page. Now we're in a new section. At this point, it makes sense for me to type out all of my section headings for the different parts of the brief. I like doing this at this stage of the process because it essentially gives me a blank canvas for each section of the brief. For this exemplar, I'm just using the exact section headings that appeared in the publicly filed brief that I'm basing this on. For you out there watching this video, your headings may be different for your brief. For example, if you're in a different jurisdiction, the rules will call for different headings. And even if you're in Wisconsin, there can be some variation. For example, I'm encouraging my students to add an introduction, which would appear as a separate section heading. So the first step you do before any of this is determine what headings you need to include, and then you can type them in. Also, I want to note these section headings are the one type of heading that I tend to type in all caps. That's because these are just words or phrases like argument or statement of facts. For point headings, by contrast, which are written as complete sentences, I would type those using sentence case, i.e. with the first letter being a capital and otherwise lowercase. So all I've done so far is typed out the names of my headings. And I've been doing this in Times New Roman 13 point, which comports to the rules in Wisconsin. But now I want to format my headings and insert the appropriate breaks. I want each of my section headings to be bold-faced and centered. So I'm just going to do that for this first heading, for the table of contents. I'm putting this bold, making this centered. And here's the first key step for setting up the table of contents. I also need to label the heading so that Microsoft Word knows that this is a heading that should appear in the table of contents. And for this, you should recall what I mentioned before, that these section headings are going to be marked as heading 1, which means it's just the first layer of headings to show up in the table of contents. So to do that, I'm going to go to this Styles menu, which is under the home screen, and I'm going to hover over heading 1. And when I do that, you'll see it kind of shows this really ugly kind of blue font, which is awkward style, not at all something that we would use in legal writing. So I don't actually want to change my heading to this style, but I do want to label the heading as heading 1. So how do I do this? I'm going to go hover over heading 1. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to click Update Heading 1 to match selection. Bingo, and now heading 1 is the proper formatting. So I can just kind of click heading 1 here, and this has been marked as a heading 1 style. So now Microsoft Word knows table of contents is heading 1. And now going ahead, every time that you mark another heading as heading 1, Word is going to make it conform to this style. So in other words, I only need to manually format this heading the first time. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm just going to go ahead and mark each of these headings as heading 1, a statement of issues for review, heading 1. Now that all of my headings are marked, I want to add my page breaks and section breaks. So the first one we'll want is between the table of contents and table of authorities. The table of authorities should start on a new page, but it's still the same part of the brief as the table of contents because both of them have the Roman numerals for the page numbers. So I'm going to go to Layout, Breaks, and just add a page break right here. Boom, that adds a page break. Now, at the beginning of the statement of issues for review, here I want to add a section break because now this is starting a new part. And I'll put the cursor just right at the beginning of whatever heading is going to be the start of the next section or the next page. So I'm going to go breaks, and now section breaks, next page, click. And so now we have the second of section breaks, the one differentiating the tables, the preliminary part of the brief from the substance of the brief. And now for each of these next sections, I'm just going to add a page break. I'm going to keep statement on oral argument and statement on publication on the same page. I won't put a break there because that's what the brief we're basing this off of did. So page break at the beginning of statement of facts, page break for the start of the standard of review, page break for the start of the argument, and page break at the start of the conclusion. Now that I've marked all the headings as heading 1, I want you to see how that allows us to generate an automatic table of contents using Microsoft Word. So I'm going to go up here to References, and then you see there's Table of Contents over here on the left. I'm going to click on Table of Contents, and this allows you to just insert the table of contents. I'm going to go to Custom Table of Contents, and if I just click OK, you see there's some, again, wonky fonts. This is not really what the appearance that I want for my brief, in particular because it's inconsistent from the formatting of the rest of the brief. So I'm just going to go click Undo, and let's try again. I'm going to go back to Table of Contents, Custom Table of Contents. I'm just going to hit Modify here, then I'm going to hit Modify again, and I'm going to change the formatting to Times New Roman, and I'm going to make it 13 point because that's consistent with the rest of my brief. And if I just click OK, OK again, now it generates a table of contents which is consistent with the formatting for the rest of my brief. This is not the final version of the table of contents because, again, this only includes my section headings. This doesn't have any of the point headings because I haven't generated any of my point headings yet. But I just wanted you to see how that initial step we took of marking everything using the styles function as heading 1 then tells Microsoft Word, when we go to generate the table of contents, that all of these things should appear in the table. And the way I went about this, messing with the custom table of contents, I frankly don't really understand how all of these features work and these different table of contents layers, but ultimately if you just go and click these modify buttons and change the font, that should do the trick for you. But I'm again going to go back and click Undo because right now I don't want to actually have the table of contents at the beginning of my document. I'm just starting to write and I don't need that there. I'm going to go and I'm going to add that closer to the end of the process when I'm done. Now there's one more preliminary step we should take at this stage, which is inserting our page numbers because they don't yet appear in this document. You'll remember there were 3 parts of the brief. The cover page, the first part, that has no page number, so we don't need to worry about that. The next part is where the tables appear and possibly other preliminary material that uses Roman numerals for the page numbers, and then the rest of the brief we have Arabic numerals. So let's add those now. Again, don't need to worry about that for the first part, but for the second part, under the tables of contents, I'm going to click into the footer. Microsoft Word tells me this is the footer for section 2 because of the page break I put in. See, when I scroll up on the previous page, it says footer section 1. This is the first page of the footer for section 2. It also says on the right, same as previous. That means that the 2 sections are going to have the same formatting, but I don't want that because our sections have different paginations, so I'm going to get rid of that link between the sections. So to do that, I'm going to go up to this menu where it says header and footer, which kind of automatically shows up when you click into the footer. And here on link to previous, that's the command that creates this link to the previous section to continue using the same header or footer. I'm going to click on this to turn that off, so now there's no longer this link to previous. Now I'm going to click back into the footer to insert my page number. So I'm back at the header and footer menu. I'm going to go click page number here. Bottom of page is where I want it. Plain number 2, this shows it in the center. So that works for me. As an initial matter, I'm just going to go right here and change the font to Times New Roman. 11 point is fine because that's the footer, so it's going to be a small, makes sense for it to be a smaller font than the rest of the document. I'm going to go back to page number, click Format Page Numbers. I'm going to change number format to these lowercase Roman numerals, and I don't want it to continue from the previous section. I'm just going to say start at 1. And so now we have that, Roman numeral 1 here. You see we have Roman numeral 2. And now when we get to the new section, the third section, Statement of Issues for Review, I'm going to, again, click here. I don't want this to be the same as previous, so I'm going to get rid of that link. Sorry, click here on to get rid of the link to previous. Now I'm going to go highlight this page number, go back to page number, click Format Page Numbers, and here having the Arabic numeral is fine, but I don't want it to continue from the previous section. Now I want it to start at 1. So click Start at 1. So here we are with page number 1 at the start of the Statement of Issues for Review, whereas the Table of Authorities had Roman numeral 2, and the Table of Contents had Roman numeral 1. So that's exactly the pagination that I wanted. Okay, this is finally the point where there's some real class participation. Now you should open the document that you should have received along with this video, which should be a complete version of this brief that I've been working on with all the text in all the different sections. The only thing that it's missing is the tables. And this version of the document that you receive, it should already have the appropriate section and page breaks. It should already have the page numbers in it, but none of the headings have been marked. So you can start by practicing what I had illustrated before, going to the different section headings, highlighting them, going up to headings here, seeing it gets all wonky. Then instead you can go right-click and update the heading to match selection, and then go through marking each of the section headings as heading 1. After you do that, jump ahead to the arguments section, which is where there are point headings. And here you can see the point headings for this document. I didn't do anything fancy to format these point headings. I just used Word's automated numbering for this. You can see if you hit enter, then it kind of continues the numbering like that. As I mentioned before, these headings should be sentence case. I make them bold, and if the heading goes onto a second line, which it typically does, I make sure that there's alignment alongside this left side so it doesn't kind of go all the way back to the left margin when it goes on to the next line. And I do that by kind of playing with these markers up here. I have no idea what they're called. I'm not an expert at Word. I just kind of play with these things. So assuming that you have set up your point headings, now is the point when you're going to mark those point headings so that they can be recognized by Microsoft Word as part of the table of contents. So for this one, I'm going to highlight this, and I now want to mark this as heading 2, because you'll remember heading 1, that was all of the section headings, and this is now kind of a layer of heading below that. But again, the formatting is wonky, so I'm going to go right-click, say Update Heading 2 to match selection, and it does that. I'm going to have to do the same thing for my third layer of heading, and now you'll see it didn't previously have a heading 3 option, but once I created a heading 2, then it adds a heading 3. So again, I'm going to go right-click for heading 3, Update Heading 3 to match selection. Now it does it, and I can just go ahead and mark all the remaining headings appropriately. So this is now going to be another heading 3. This will be my last heading 3. Then we'll have a second heading 2. And actually, so it added some formatting, so it kind of created a double Roman numeral 2, which I just got rid of. And I think that should be it. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning and try to insert the table of contents, so references, table of contents, custom table of contents. What we had done previously when we only had one layer of heading was modify this font to be Times New Roman 13, so that's still present. I might need to do the same thing for the other two layers of the table. Let's see. Yes, so I like the formatting for the regular headings, but I need to fix the formatting for the headings level 2 and 3. So I'm just going to go back to undo that. I'm going to say custom table of contents, and I'm going to click modify and table of contents 2. That I'm also going to change to Times New Roman 13. And then finally, table of content level 3, I'm going to modify to Times New Roman 13. And let's see how this turns out. Okay, okay, okay. And there we have it, like a pretty well formatted table of contents.